I clenched my fists, my breath coming out in short, furious bursts. The towering oak trees that lined the driveway swayed gently in the evening breeze, but inside me, a storm was raging. "Liam," I said, my voice trembling with barely controlled rage. "You had no right." He shrugged, his cocky grin faltering just a little. "It's just a house, bro. You have enough money to buy another one." This deal was too good to pass up. Too good. Scoffed. 3 million. Liam, this property is worth at least 9. You just threw away 6 million like it was pocket change. That flicker of unease returned to his eyes, and I knew there was something he wasn't telling me. My brother was reckless, sure, but he wasn't completely stupid. If he had undersold the farmhouse so drastically, there had to be a reason. I stepped closer, my gaze never leaving his. "Who did you sell it to?" He hesitated. "Liam." "Bart." "Some investor," he muttered. "Big-time guy. He paid in cash, quick and clean. No hassle, no negotiations. Cash. That didn't sit right with me. A property like ours would normally take months to sell. Agents, paperwork, appraisals. Something about this deal stank of desperation. But whose? Liam's? Or the buyer's? A cold dread crawled up my spine. "Do you even know who this guy is? Did you check anything before signing the papers?" Liam rubbed the back of his neck, his usual arrogance crumbling under the weight of my stare. "I mean, not really. His lawyer handled everything." I felt my stomach drop. If Liam hadn't done his due diligence, there was a chance he had been played. Worse, I could have just lost my family's farmhouse to someone who had their own agenda. Someone who didn't care about its history, its worth, or the blood, sweat, and tears that had built it. I turned and stormed into the house, my boots echoing off the polished wooden floors. The scent of aged timber and leather-bound books filled the air, a familiar comfort now tainted by betrayal. I needed answers. I grabbed my laptop from the old oak desk in my father's study and began searching public records, property transfers, anything that would tell me who now held the deed to my family's land. As I clicked through files, my heart pounded. Then I saw the name. A chill ran down my spine. The buyer wasn't just any investor. He was someone I knew. Someone I had crossed paths with before. Someone who had a reason to want this land. And Liam had no idea what he had just done. I turned slowly, my eyes locking onto my brother, who was still lingering by the door, shifting uncomfortably. "You didn't just sell a farmhouse, Liam," I said, my voice dangerously low. "You sold our family's legacy to the one person who should never have gotten his hands on it." His face paled. "What do you mean?" I exhaled sharply. "We need to fix this. Now. Because if we didn't, everything our family had built, everything my parents had worked for, would be lost." And I wasn't about to let that happen. I gripped the yellowed pages of the document, my hands trembling with a mixture of rage and exhilaration. Liam thought he had pulled off the perfect scheme, but he had overlooked something crucial. My parents had been meticulous in protecting our legacy, and now their foresight was my lifeline. I leaned back in my father's old leather chair, the familiar creak grounding me for a moment. My mind raced. Liam had committed fraud. He had forged my signature, illegally transferring ownership of the farmhouse to some mysterious investor. But if this trust clause was still legally binding, and I was betting everything that it was, I had the power to undo the sale. I grabbed my phone and dialed my lawyer, Robert Grayson. He picked up on the third ring. "Grayson Law," he answered in his usual clipped tone. "Robert, it's me. I have an emergency." "Let me guess," he sighed. "Liam." Clenched my jaw. "He sold the farmhouse without my consent." Then, what? "Yeah," I said, rubbing my temple. "Forged my signature. But I found something, an old trust agreement my parents put in place. It states that the farmhouse cannot be sold without my explicit written approval." I heard papers shuffling on his end. "If that clause is still enforceable, you have a case. Strong one. We could challenge the sale and potentially have it voided." "That's exactly what I need to do." "All right. Send me a copy of the document." I'll go through it tonight and file an injunction first thing in the morning. I exhaled, feeling a sliver of hope. Thanks, Robert. I owe you. Just don't let Liam near any more legal documents, he muttered before hanging up. I dropped my phone onto the desk and turned to Liam, who was slumped against the doorframe, arms crossed. His face a mixture of defiance and unease. You forged my signature, I said, my voice calm but laced with anger. He scoffed. It's not a big deal. The deal is done. Not if I can help it, I shot back. And if this goes to court, you realize you could be charged with fraud? That wiped the smugness off his face. His Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed. You wouldn't do that to me. I stood, pushing the chair back with a screech. You already did it to yourself. Liam looked away, his fingers drumming anxiously against the wooden doorframe. I didn't have a choice, he muttered. I was in deep with some people. Dangerous people. Froze. What people, Liam? He didn't answer right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I owed them money. A lot of it. They weren't going to wait any longer. I clenched my jaw, the anger in my chest giving way to something colder, dread. How much? Asked. 5 million. My stomach turned. And you thought selling the farmhouse for 3 would solve it? I thought I could negotiate by some time, he admitted, rubbing his face. But I messed up. I didn't check who I was selling to. My worst fears were confirmed. Liam hadn't just sold the farmhouse to some investor. He had sold it to someone who knew its real worth, someone who saw an opportunity in his desperation. And now we were both caught in a mess far bigger than just a forged signature. A new battle had begun, one that wasn't just about saving my family's legacy. It was about survival. The more I dug, the worse it got. The buyer wasn't just some investor looking for a good deal. It was an international corporation with deep pockets and ruthless tactics. They had been eyeing our land for years, waiting for a crack in our family's defenses. Liam had unknowingly handed them the golden ticket. I slammed my laptop shut, my pulse pounding. They weren't just planning to resell the farmhouse or renovate it. No, they wanted to bulldoze it, erase every trace of my family's legacy and replace it with some soulless commercial development. And thanks to Liam's reckless decision, they finally had the means to do it. I turned to my brother, who was still standing near the door, shifting uneasily. Do you have any idea what you've done? Liam frowned, confused. I sold a house, man. That's it. I laughed bitterly. You didn't just sell a house. You handed over our family's history to a corporation that's been trying to wipe us off the map for years. His face paled. Wait, what? I thought it was just some investor. Yeah, well, you thought wrong. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to steady my nerves. And now, they're about to bulldoze everything our parents worked for, unless I stop them. That was when I remembered one last clause in the trust agreement. I snatched up the document, reading through it again with fresh eyes. My parents hadn't just made it difficult to sell the farmhouse, they had built a safeguard. There was a reversion clause buried in the fine print. If the property was ever sold under false pretenses, including fraud, the sale could be legally voided, and the land would revert back to me. I exhaled sharply. This was it. This was my chance. But it wouldn't be easy. The corporation wouldn't just roll over and give up. They had likely pulled strings, greased palms, and set everything in motion to make sure this sale was airtight. I'd be going up against a team of high-powered lawyers, a multi-million-dollar corporation, and a brother who had dug himself into a hole so deep he couldn't see the way out. Liam, I said, turning to him, you need to tell me everything you know about this deal. Every meeting, every conversation, every document you signed. He hesitated, but I wasn't in the mood for his games. You don't get to hide anything from me. Not anymore. My voice was sharp, unyielding. This is bigger than you. Bigger than your debts. If we don't fight this, we lose everything. For the first time, I saw genuine regret in his eyes. He nodded. Okay. I'll tell you everything. 'Cause I was ready for war. And I wasn't going to lose. The company that had bought the farmhouse refused to back down. They had deep pockets, a team of ruthless lawyers, and a vested interest in crushing any resistance. Their response was swift and aggressive. They filed counterclaims, threatened defamation lawsuits, and even attempted to paint me as an unreasonable heir clinging to the past. Liam, now fully realizing the magnitude of his mistake, looked like a man drowning. He had already spent a significant portion of the money, paying off debts, making reckless purchases, and trying to dig himself out of a financial grave. Even if he wanted to undo his actions, he had no way to repay the $3 million he had accepted. Worse, he was terrified of the corporation's legal threats, and every time I tried to get him to cooperate, he looked ready to bolt. But I wasn't giving up. With my lawyer, Robert Grayson, by my side, we took the fight to court. The case quickly gained traction, and before I knew it, the media caught wind of the story. Air battles International Corporation over family farmhouse. The headlines painted me as the underdog against a faceless corporate giant. Public outrage erupted. People despised seeing big corporations bulldoze history in the name of profit. The farmhouse, once just a relic of my family's legacy, became a symbol, a battle between tradition and corporate greed. Protesters showed up outside the courthouse. Farmers, preservationists, and even ordinary citizens began rallying behind me, calling for the land to be protected. The corporation's lawyers scrambled to do damage control, but the more they fought, the more dirt was uncovered. Investigative journalists dug into their past business dealings, revealing a pattern of shady land acquisitions, forged documents, and legal loopholes they had exploited in other states. This wasn't just about my farmhouse anymore. It was about exposing their entire operation. Still, the battle was far from over. The corporation tried every dirty trick in the book. They offered me a settlement, a hefty sum to walk away and let them have the land. They dug into my past, looking for anything they could use against me. Financial troubles, personal mistakes, anything to discredit me in the public eye. And when that didn't work, things turned ugly. I started receiving anonymous threats. My car's tires were slashed outside my lawyer's office. Strange men in suits started showing up at places I frequented. Silent reminders that the corporation was watching. But they had underestimated me. I wasn't just fighting for a house. I was fighting for my family's name, my parents' legacy, and the principle that money shouldn't buy everything. The turning point came when we presented the smoking gun in court. The reversion clause in the trust agreement. Liam had committed fraud, and fraud made the sale null and void. The judge agreed. With the public against them and the legal system backing my claim, the corporation's grip on the property crumbled. Their lawyers scrambled for a way out, but there was none. The farmhouse was mine again. Liam, for all his faults, finally stood before me, eyes filled with shame. "I screwed up, man," he said, voice thick with regret. I don't even know how to fix this." "You can't," I told him, my tone firm but not cruel. "But you can start making things right." And for the first time in his life, he listened. The farmhouse stood tall, untouched. My family's legacy remained intact, but the battle had changed me. I wasn't just an heir anymore. I was a fighter, someone who knew that some things were worth more than money. And as I looked out over the land my parents had worked so hard for, I knew one thing for certain. No one would ever take it from me again. Just when I thought I had everything under control, a shocking discovery turned my world upside down. After winning the case and reclaiming the farmhouse, I decided to go through every inch of the property. If Liam had managed to sell it under my nose, what else had been overlooked? My father had always been a meticulous man, keeping records and secrets buried in places only he understood. That's when I found it. Behind an old bookshelf in his study, a small indentation in the wooden panel caught my eye. I pushed against it, and the panel slid open with a quiet click. Behind it was a rusted key and a note in my father's handwriting. "Some things are worth more than money. Protect our legacy." My pulse quickened. I searched the house, trying to match the key to something, anything. After hours of combing through every cabinet, drawer, and locked compartment, I finally found it. An underground safe beneath the farmhouse. A trapdoor, hidden under an old rug in the basement, led to a steel vault embedded in the concrete floor. With shaking hands, I inserted the key and turned it. The lock clicked open. Inside was a thick stack of documents, yellowed with age, sealed in a waterproof container. As I sifted through them, my breath caught in my throat. Our land wasn't just farmland. It was sitting on top of a hidden resource worth millions, possibly even billions. Mineral rights, underground reserves. My father had known about it but had never cashed in, refusing to let corporate greed take over our land. These weren't just records, they were proof. Geological surveys, historical data, and contracts dating back decades, all confirming the untapped wealth beneath the farmhouse. Liam, in his recklessness, had nearly given it away for pennies. My stomach twisted as the realization sank in. The corporation that had tried to steal my home. They had known. They hadn't just wanted the land for a commercial development. They had been after the hidden fortune beneath it all along. And Liam had played right into their hands. I stormed upstairs, clutching the documents, my heart pounding like a war drum. Liam was sitting on the porch, head in his hands, still reeling from everything that had happened. He looked up when I approached, his expression wary. "What now?" he muttered. I threw the papers down in front of him. "Take a look at what you almost handed over for nothing." He picked up a page and read, his face draining of color with each word. No way. This has to be a mistake." "It's not," I said, crossing my arms. "Dad knew. That's why he protected the land so fiercely. That's why the corporation wanted it so badly. They weren't just stealing our home, Liam. They were trying to rob us blind." Liam ran a hand through his hair, his breathing uneven. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." I narrowed my eyes. Maybe not. But they did. And that meant one thing. They weren't going to give up. My legal victory had been a setback for them, not a defeat. Now that I knew the truth, I was officially a threat. They would come at me with everything they had. Lawsuits, buyout offers, intimidation. And if those didn't work, something worse. I had won the battle for the farmhouse. But the war for what lay beneath it had just begun. The documents detailed extensive mineral deposits beneath the land. Gold, silver, and rare minerals essential for high-tech industries, the kind of resources that countries waged wars over. My father must have known about them but had chosen not to exploit them, valuing the land's purity over wealth. He had protected this secret for years, shielding our home from the kind of ruthless greed that could tear it apart. And now, thanks to Liam's recklessness, that very greed had a foot in the door. The corporation that had purchased the farmhouse had no idea they were sitting on a gold mine. But I did. And that meant, for the first time since this war began, I had the advantage. Checkmate was within reach. I just had to make the right move. I stormed into their corporate office, my lawyer at my side, documents in hand. Their legal team had been expecting a desperate man fighting to reclaim a sentimental farmhouse. What they got was a fully armed adversary ready to dismantle their entire plan. Their lead attorney, a slick-haired man with the kind of confidence that came from winning too many cases, barely looked up from his papers. "Mr. Callahan, I hope you're not here to waste our time. You lost the land. Accept it and move on." I tossed the geological reports onto the polished oak conference table. "You should read those before you assume anything." His brow furrowed as he flipped through the documents. Then his expression changed. His fingers tightened around the papers, and for the first time he looked unsettled. Smirk. "That's right. You didn't just buy a farmhouse. You bought the most valuable stretch of land in this state. And you paid a laughable $3 million for it." The room fell silent. The weight of their blunder began sinking in. I leaned forward, my voice calm but firm. "Here's what's going to happen. You have two choices. 1. You can try to keep the land and fight me in court for the next decade. I'll drag this battle through the media. I'll get environmentalists involved. And I'll make sure your investors realize you're sitting on a legal nightmare. When I'm done, your stock value will tank, and you'll wish you never heard the name Callahan. I let the words settle before delivering the second option. Or two, you sell it back to me at a fair price, and we both walk away without bloodshed. The lead attorney's face twitched, his mind calculating the risks. He knew they couldn't afford a prolonged legal battle, not with the public already on my side. But there was no way they'd back down without a fight. We'll need time to consider, he finally said, voice clipped. I stood up. Take all the time you want. Just know this. Every second you delay, the price goes up. Back at the farmhouse, Liam was spiraling. He had finally understood the full weight of his betrayal, and for the first time in his life, he wasn't making excuses. I didn't know. I swear, he pleaded, pacing the porch like a caged animal. If I had known, I would have never sold it. I folded my arms. That's exactly the problem, Liam. You never think. You never stop to consider the consequences of your actions until it's too late. His face twisted with guilt. I'll fix it. Whatever it takes, I'll help. I narrowed my eyes. Then start proving it. Because right now, you're just another problem I have to clean up. For once, he didn't argue. He just nodded. I had two choices. Fight the corporation head-on, taking them through a legal war that could take years but would guarantee their downfall. Or use their greed against them, forcing them into a deal that put me in control. Either way, one thing was certain. I wasn't letting my family's land go that easily. And by the time I was done, the world would know that no amount of money could erase the Callahan legacy. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, activists, and even local farmers filled the seats, all waiting for the verdict. The case had become a national sensation, with public opinion overwhelmingly on my side. The corporation had tried every dirty trick in the book. They dragged out the legal proceedings, hoping to exhaust me financially. They sent men in suits to negotiate behind closed doors, offering me millions to walk away quietly. But this was never about money. It was about justice. It was about honoring my father's legacy and protecting the land that had been in my family for generations. Their final move was a bold and desperate gamble, a counter-lawsuit, claiming that I had interfered in a legal sale and damaged their business prospects. They called in their high-powered attorneys, men who had crushed small businesses and families before, expecting me to fold. They underestimated me. Because I had one thing they didn't, the hidden trust clause. The forged signature on the sale contract was the nail in their coffin. When my lawyer presented the irrefutable proof, the courtroom erupted. Gasps filled the air. The judge didn't even hesitate. The sale is void. The land remains in Mr. Callahan's possession. Furthermore, given the fraudulent nature of the transaction, the plaintiff may proceed with criminal charges. I had won. But I wasn't finished. Liam sat in the defendant's seat, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. His recklessness had cost him everything. I sued him for fraud, not out of vengeance, but because he needed to face consequences. He had nearly destroyed our family's legacy for a quick payday. His lawyer tried to argue that he had been misled by the corporation, that he didn't understand what he was doing. I stood up and looked him in the eye. How many times have you said that in your life, Liam? My voice was calm, but my words cut deep. You never understand. You never think. And when the damage is done, you always want someone else to clean up your mess. Liam swallowed hard. For once, he had nothing to say. The judge ruled against him. He was forced to pay damages, and without the money he had squandered, he was left with nothing. I didn't revel in his downfall, but I hoped that, for once in his life, he would learn the value of responsibility. The farmhouse was mine again, but I didn't just reclaim it, I rebuilt its future. Instead of selling the land or keeping it as a simple farmhouse, I partnered with ethical developers to create an eco-friendly project that both preserved my family's history and unlocked its hidden potential. We built a sustainable agricultural business, restoring the farmland while responsibly utilizing the mineral resources beneath. The local community benefited. Jobs were created. The land thrived, just as my ancestors had always intended. As I stood on the porch, looking over the fields bathed in golden sunlight, I felt a sense of peace. This land had been my family's for generations. It had survived wars, economic crashes, betrayal, and greed. And now it was stronger than ever. Because I had fought for it. Because I had refused to let it go. And no one would ever take it from me again. The end.